Gonna use our imaginations for this intro music.
Four scores, seven.
Welcome to the Rogue History Podcast.
Welcome to Rogue History. I promise you, we're gonna get a crazy intro. And I'm Edgar, also Eggy, Spaghetti.
I'm Alex, just Alex.
Just Alex, you
No
got a
spaghetti.
moniker? You
No
gotta get a
spaghetti.
moniker, bro. Everybody needs their own moniker.
I am Alejandro Amoretti.
That's good. I like that. That's a good one.
I'm just Brian Lai. Don't got any other names in there. No middle name, nothing. Low syllable count, too.
I'm Yaz, also go by Yazinator.
You know what I'm saying? The human birth control. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Oh,
although I would not recommend you guys use it. It was recalled before, so all the ladies out there, stay away from the Yaz birth control.
I'm pretty sure they discontinued it.
I wouldn't think my mom is listening, but it's worth saying that she was on birth control for all three of us, and none of that shit in the 80s worked.
Oh,
None of that shit works.
My bad.
So boom. Last episode, we were able to set our time frame and our place. We know where time begins for us,
Right.
and we know how we feel about where we are. So that gives us a good starting point to then ask you. Now we could get into some more philosophical stuff, some more out there stuff. How do you feel about the war on science?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So
Damn.
and we're gonna go reverse.
We're starting off on that.
Yeah, we're starting off with that. We're
All
starting
right.
off strong. We're coming with the heat strong, and then we'll doze off later.
Damn,
and
okay.
the shit is, just to switch it up a little bit, we're
Yeah.
gonna go ahead and go in reverse alphabetical order just to make
All right.
things
Now-
different.
Make
Now
me
you're really
special.
fucking shit up.
Yeah, you know
I
what
don't
I
know
mean?
if I belong here anymore.
And yo, the
right.
shit is
Shit
that
up.
Brian is such a steady force that he's still in the same spot that he would be in.
Damn.
So
That's
you know what I mean?
deep,
It's
Brian.
crazy.
That's true.
So let's go ahead. Yaz, give us your take on the war on science, and if you could tell us what the war on science is, or what you think it is, what you perceive it to be, that'll give me some background to make comments on the side.
So I think there is some sort of war on science. I don't think it's only coordinated by like governments and stuff. It's mostly special interest group. So for example, a really famous article from the New York Times came out 2 years ago about how the sugar industry shifted the blame to fat as the main cause of heart diseases and like everything else that is wrong with us. And it was Harvard scientists conducting the study, and they're like showing that, there's a correlation between fat and heart disease, which was like not true at all. It turned out that they were paid by like the big sugar industry.
Wait a goddamn second. So fat free has no effect on you? Like, wait.
So I mean, the way I'm saying is like, if like something is fat free, it doesn't mean it's good for you. Because
Okay.
like if it's going to be high in carbs, high in sugar. So after
Right.
that report came out, there's been a high movement, like a concentrated movement for a ketogenic diet, which is like reducing the amount of carbs and sugar that you take and focusing more on high fat diet, which is fat is like a battery for your body.
No,
but
I
like,
got a big ass battery. My shit's like 35,000 mi. You heard?
You got an energizer.
but like,
Fucking
but like
Duracell.
no, right.
You could run for like 30 lifetimes.
I'm out.
Right, but like I mean, like if you look at it as a battery, you can survive off that battery for a long time because that's what fat is used for. So that example, like for me, I think is what a war on science is, which is special interest group manipulating scientific data and for their own interests. Now that is, in my opinion, is a bad thing. But like hypothetically speaking, in this country, even though there's like some sort of war on science by different special interest groups, I think science in the end prevails. Because even if like the truth comes out like, hey, like sugar is actually the thing that is bad for you, it still takes a long time for everyone to come on board and understand that. That's the most, powerful thing about this country. And it's like, you can use the truth to change people's perception, not immediately, but over time.
So I guess your vision for the war on science is more based on the idea of like special interest group getting faulty science out there.
Right. And like, so I mean, even like, let's say coal, like now it's like the whole like coal industry for like power and stuff. Like a long time ago, coal was the perfect thing to do, scientifically speaking. You can use coal for combustion engine for like running power and stuff because there was no solar power back then. But then over time, you gather data on how it affects the environment, and then it indicates that if you use renewable energy, it does actually, reduce the amount of impact on the environment versus coal. Now, the problem with special interest group and bad science is that, just by having that data, it doesn't mean that, the coal plant's going to like dismantle their factories right away and just like, but
Yeah.
like
I'm gonna jump in on that actually because you bring up a very good topic here.
Damn, Brian, your voice is just amazing.
Is it?
Yeah, it is. It really is.
Thank you.
It really is.
You gotta be on radio.
Like my ears are
Sultry
fawning right now.
It's like eargasm right
Yeah,
here.
right.
I
I
see-
have wax pouring out of my ear right now. It's just like it's
Like the lights
I
in the
see you
room
guys-
just dimmed.
Yeah,
and, you
I
know.
see you guys blushing. But on the topic of coal, actually, so there's a lot of like global politics going on right now about like India and China, basically like being huge polluters, shit like that, right?
Right.
But they need to do that, right? They basically grew from like an undeveloped third world country with basically no industry, no modern technology,
Right.
into global powers within like 50 years.
Right. Yeah.
It took America and the Western world 200, 300 years to grow to what we are today. And they did that in like 40, 50 years.
That's
right?
that's not a fair equivalent though. It's
Because
not
you
a
know-
fair
no, it's not
equivalent
a fair
because of the
equivalent.
technology available.
Yeah. They
for-
had it from
during the
from
times
West.
when they
right,
developed.
right.
You know what I
But
mean?
they can't just make the jump from like sticks and stones. I mean, that's obviously
break
like an
your
exaggeration. Yeah.
No, I'm sorry.
They can't break an exaggeration, but they can't make that jump, you
Yeah.
know, like from what they were working with to, you know, like solar panels and like, you know, making cell phones and shit like that without going through the step of burning coal and other fossil fuels. you
And
know?
this was India and China.
Right. And
Okay.
other countries as well, but they're obviously like the biggest.
They're like the headline.
They're the
ones.
biggest ones, right?
Yeah.
It's worth noting that China would technically be a second world.
Yes.
Country.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
well,
mean, these
you know,
are actually
it's
like
funny. That was a comeback
political
question for me
terms, yeah.
because that's a common like thing that I have with people is that for some reason at some point third world became
Well, third world just meant you didn't pick a side between
Yeah,
communism
Soviets.
and
Right,
capitalism.
exactly,
Yeah.
right. But like
specifically
it-
Soviets and America.
in America, yeah.
Yeah.
Specifically, it was after World War II during the Cold
Right.
War.
Yeah.
If you aligned with the Soviets, you were second world. If you aligned with America, you were first world. And then the third world countries were all the unaligned countries, and that somehow became came
synonymous
to mean poor.
with undeveloped.
Yeah,
not
or
Brook history.
poor. I
Yeah,
that
or
was going poor. Yeah,
I'm gonna just say poor
It's
countries
like,
from
yeah,
now on.
like,
then.
like
Yeah,
people,
scratch
people
that.
are just like,
I
yo,
fuck with
these,
that.
yeah. So, all right, Brian. So,
Yeah.
so now we got some of your take on coal and all that. And so, how do you perceive the war on science, and what does that mean to you?
It's a multi-dimensional issue here. War on science. It definitely exists, but it's not just on science. There's certainly a war on religion. We don't like to talk about that too.
You
but
gotta pick a side.
yeah, you really do. That's ultimately what it is, right? It's about fundamentalist beliefs. People these days believe in science almost as if like it were a religion. It's an absolute truth.
It's also worth noting that you're talking about like the scientific community, science as
Definitely.
people think about it,
Right.
not the scientific
Not the
method, which is
method,
just a
right.
tool for
Exactly.
discovery
Yeah.
and research.
Right. That's exactly what I mean.
Right.
Well, maybe not so much war.
Yeah, like my
actually.
so here's what I'm trying to like figure out, because when you talk about, let's say, like a war on science, right? We're talking about more of like a lashback.
Yeah, if you're talking about a
Blashback.
war-
Backlash.
Yeah, backlash.
The
If
fuck
you're
kind
talking
of
about a war
backward shit?
on any idea, like a war on an idea,
Yeah.
not an
Yeah.
actual thing, but
Yeah,
an
yeah,
idea.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
anything where people are like actively campaigning against it, I would consider a war on blank. You know?
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So-
It's not so much an active thing. War might not be a good word for it, but unfortunately, we don't have like a very good alternative.
Nah, war on has a great ring to it, though.
It does.
The war on.
You know, frankly, that's just like
Yeah, motherfucker.
on
that's just
drugs.
like media hyperbole, right?
Yeah,
there,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
like-
Or the war
Textbook.
on marijuana.
So what's Alex? So do you agree also that there's some kind of war on science that's we're actively in the midst of?
I think it could be seen in just gag orders, right? Like the fact that the EPA
yeah.
has gag orders on its staff, the fact that there's research that's not allowed to be released. I mean, what the fuck is that, you know?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
it'd be one thing to have it come out and be like, you know, this is inconclusive, or include some kind of asterisk, you know, footnote that says, like, you know, this is the working theory and it's not necessarily proven by all scientists. Yeah, I get that. But to just be like, you can't talk about this, that's some, like, black cloak and mask type of shit right there.
Well,
Yeah.
so okay, so here's my so I feel like this is different than what I initially understood it to mean, right? So like the idea that there are not the idea that the fact that the EPA has gag orders and there's certain studies and things that can't be released, right? That's more of like a war on information, right? Like not necessarily the science itself. The information can't be released.
It's a war on the scientific community, though, because if there's a consensus and that community, which again is not the method, but the community, really wants the public to know about this, and elected officials are like, nah.
But that doesn't feel like it's an attack on science. That's more of like a hoarding of power, right? Like knowledge, the knowledge that could be spread out is being withheld.
I'd consider
that's
it
more of a power struggle.
One and the same. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
My idea of this war on science was more the growing community of flat earthers. Right,
that's a side effect.
This was my idea of it, is the fact that more and more people are saying it's like the pendulum is swinging back, right? Because there was a time when we decided collectively to be like, yo, you see these fucking magic tricks? Fuck these magic tricks. Yeah. I want to know how you did that shit. Yeah, right. You know what I'm saying? Where we were like, we're tired of the illusions, right? Yeah. And the pendulum swang in the way of now we want the scientific method. Now we want to know how you separated that woman. Yeah. We were no longer pacified by the idea that it was magic, right? Yeah.
Now so that'd be the war on religion,
right? And that would be the war on religion, where it was kind of like all these how do you say deities? All these deities they began crumbling down. We began to chip at the ideas that, yo, how could two people have created the entire populace? Right, you know, how do you fit two of every animal on a boat? Like, where do you put the shit? You know what I mean? Like, it's all these things we started to chip away at, to the point where we got to just, now it's just like, give me science or give me death, right? And then once you get to that point, now the pendulum is swinging in the other way, where people are uber spiritual now. Motherfuckers are collecting rocks and following the signs of the moons and rubbing rocks for good luck, and the earth is flat and everyone is spiritual, and you do a little yoga and meditate.
The pendulum swung so hard that it broke everyone's minds. And now people don't know what to believe. And there's a massive vacuum in both spiritual belief and hard science. You know, when Obama was in office, you got some guy bringing in a snowball being like, see, there's no global warming, there's snow outside. And that simplified type of way of thinking is really appealing to people that don't have the time to do the science themselves. They go like, I don't feel like the earth is round, so it can't be round.
Well, I'm gonna just jump on that one. There was also like a period of time where there was like a collective culture of kind of like science shaming, smart shaming, for like being a nerd.
Yeah, that's true.
Right.
I mean, now it's like kind of popular again for whatever reason, right? Like tech guys are like rock stars in some spheres.
It's the money.
It is the money. Yeah. That's not for whatever reason.
Tech guys have their own shows.
Yeah, like in America, we used to worship astronauts. We used to worship physicists.
Right.
This is how we beat the Soviet Union.
That's what it was in the 50s, 60s, 70s. And then, like, in the 80s and 90s, we started getting, like, in the culture and the media, like, oh, these cool guys, skateboarder bros, you know, like,
I mean, it
didn't give a shit about
like
school.
Being vegged out was dope.
Exactly, yeah. And now...
Yo, it's now so pretty fun to be vegged out. I enjoy being vegged out.
It sort of reminds me of Red Hot Chili Peppers song. Like, in Californication, there's a quote, and Anthony Kiedis says... space may be the final frontier, but it's made in a Hollywood basement. And I was like, I mean, it's not to like give any credit to the flat earthers theory, but like, you know, these kind of things, you know, do pop up in, you know, pop culture where it's like you question what's like the final frontier and all that kind of stuff.
People say things like, oh, you know, the nutrition community changes their minds every 10 years and stuff like that. But I mean, honestly, the answer to bad science is just better science. And that's why, like, you shouldn't get too hung up on any specific idea. You got to be able to, like, you know, we're wrong about the whole saturated fats thing. It's really the carbs.
Right.
Just, you know, for our listeners out there, don't go too heavy with the fat too. You know, like just everything in moderation. I don't want everyone getting heart disease.
Well, I mean, that would save a lot of people from a lot of grief, right? Because there was a time where like being religious was stupid to me. Like I think that we entered a point in time where like you couldn't be smart and religious. The two didn't coincide.
Right. There were conflicting ideas.
Right. They were like for a long time there were conflicting ideas, and I think that's where there was that war on religion kind of thing comes in, where all of a sudden it became like, if you want to be smart, you need to know that it's impossible to turn water to wine.
And that smug attitude can be kind of a turnoff.
It could be very smug, but then and that helped the pendulum swing directly towards science. But then when you look at how smug they are, and then when you look at science itself requires you to suspend your disbelief almost just as much as religion does.
Absolutely.
And the reason is that I have to believe that I'm actually not touching this table.
Right.
And what happens is that because atoms can't touch, they split. And that's why like a knife cuts me. Right? Because the knife never cuts me. The knife never actually touches my skin, but rather it spreads the atoms because they can't connect with each other.
Don't try this at home, ladies.
And well, but that's what I'm saying. But it's like I'm supposed to believe that shit, as opposed to like, yo, this knife is fucking cutting me. You understand what I mean?
Like, so religion tries to explain why things happen, while science tries to explain how things happen. Science can never tell you why something happened.
I like
it
that.
can always tell you how.
Yeah, that's
the
not
detail,
true. Though.
The date,
That's not true. That's not true.
Like, I mean,
science
like,
does
by
tell
data-
you why things happen.
No, they
All
don't. They tell you
Science
how.
never tells you why things happen.
Why was there a Big Bang?
Yeah, that's a bad question. But science will tell you why this falls to the floor if I drop it.
How does it fall?
How?
No. It tells me why.
But it
Why
doesn't tell you why
there's
tells me why.
no truth to it.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's
There's
what I'm
like
saying.
how it
that's
falls-
that's
it
a
falls-
nice quote, but it doesn't really apply. You know that scientifically that quote is not accurate. Like if you put that through the scientific method,
Yeah.
I
Well,
don't think it's accurate.
I think religion would tell you why, because
No,
God
there's
throws things on the floor.
there is a certain truth to what Yaz is saying. Like how things happen versus why things happen. Certainly, yeah, science can't explain, like why that can is going to fall down. But at the end of the day, why is it though that gravity exists? Because that's what it is, right? That's why it happens. Gravity. Why does it exist though? We don't fucking know.
If you keep asking why, you're just going to keep going back and
Exactly.
You're gonna keep going
Right.
back.
Exactly.
You're not going to
going
find
back
So
to God,
that's
though.
that's
why.
there that certain truth right
Right.
there. Like
Yeah.
at the end of the day, why these things exist, you can't
keep
really
going back.
explain.
You will always go back to the Big Bang.
But like
Exactly. You'll go back to the
yeah.
Big Bang, and then like
sure.
someone's gonna be like, "Yo, so
Yeah.
why did that shit happen?" Yeah, you don't.
I mean,
know.
the only thing like
No one
I would
knows.
imagine is like, okay, why? Because we live in a simulation. I would take it. Like
I have
you
no
know?
problem with the simulation.
That's
I
fine,
have a
man.
problem
You know-
with
you
it.
know
As
what
long
I
as
find-
this is what it feels like,
You
I'm
know what I
perfectly
find
fine.
That's
disturbing though?
fine,
This is
yeah.
what I find disturbing. Why is it so much easier to believe in a simulation than it is to believe in God?
Well, because VR, dude. Like once you put your VR
What?
headset
No,
on,
that's
I'm like,
actually-
I
That's
believe
crazy
That's
we're
actually a
because,
really good point.
Like when you say, "Yo, if you told me that we live in a simulation, I'm all good with that." It's like you're saying, like I'm cool with that being God.
If we if we live in a
What-
simulation,
Yeah.
whoever programmed it is by that word's definition
God.
God, yeah.
Right. The thing that I was telling you the other day, which is about consciousness.
Right.
The only thing that anyone listening to this podcast could prove is the only thing in the entire universe you could prove is that you're conscious. And all you know is that you have subjective experience. You can't actually prove anything beyond that.
Yeah.
I don't know that I take it on good faith that Edgar is conscious. He
Right.
appears to me to seem like a conscious being, but I can't prove it.
Yeah.
And I don't think even the most cutting edge science can actually lock down on where and what consciousness is.
I'm gonna stop you right there before you ruin a future episode with all these facts, and we're gonna say goodbye to Yaz.
All right, take care, guys.
Yaz,
Bello.
Yaz is gonna dance his way out of his room because he doesn't want to talk about punching Nazis, which is
Yeah.
where we're going
Yeah.
next.
Yeah.
Like my opinion, definitely punch a Nazi. But first,
All right, just leave that there.
Right, but like just make sure it's a Nazi first. Not
Yeah.
just not like somebody you don't like.
Yeah, like prove it's a
All
Nazi
right, take
first.
care, guys.
Now that Yaz is out of here, we can talk about punching all the Nazis. All right, so the next topic is it's more of a philosophical question. I would say it's more of like a philosophical thing,
Yeah.
Good
and
way
it's
to think
something
about
that
it.
arose recently, right? Like just amidst all this, like,
Like 2016, it kind of came back into the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Punching Nazis.
and I guess that's the question: do we punch Nazis?
It's paradoxical almost.
Yeah,
right?
and if we're still going reverse alphabetical, B, you get to go first
Ooh,
now.
boy. Sweet. Yeah. I am.
That sigh is so loaded. I love it.
Yeah.
That's the sigh of a heavy thought.
We call
It
that
is
a pregnant pause,
Ooh.
alliteration. Pulling out
You
all my
know-
SAT words.
That prep course really worked wonders.
I'm against it. Well, I would not do it, but I think people should do it. I can't remember the exact terminology for it, but there is this sort of like paradox, essentially, contesting the whole, First Amendment thing, the freedom of speech thing, right? Essentially, it will boil down to if people are exercising their right to free speech, actually more specifically, like if they're using their free speech to make others not be able to exercise the right to free speech, is that still, acceptable? Like, should that be allowed? And that's sort of, it's kind of like a chicken and egg thing almost, you know?
That question is much easier.
Yeah,
I got the answer to chicken and egg.
Whoa,
do you want
chicken
it right
and
now?
egg? Yeah, give it to me.
It was an egg.
It's definitely the egg.
Yeah,
And
because
the key-
something else
I
gave
know.
birth to an egg.
I know.
And then the key
I
the
agree
key to
with
that
that.
question is that it's not what came first, the chicken or the chicken egg.
Yeah.
It's that's
Yeah,
where the key to the question is right there.
I
But
agree with
let's
that
go
too.
back.
But like, you know, just
I'm fucking around,
yeah,
bro. I'm
for,
just
but for
fucking
like
with you.
you know, to illustrate this idea, this thought,
Mm-hmm.
chicken and egg. But I totally agree with you on that. Egg definitely came first.
Some wild bird gave
Yeah.
birth to an egg and was like, "What the fuck is this egg? This is small and it doesn't
Yeah.
have the right colors." And then
it,
a
let's
little
eat it.
early chicken came out of it. And nobody
Yo,
knew how to take
oh.
care of it.
But
Wait
yeah,
a second.
man, it's like
I just
basically
wanna
you
go
just
back
end
to
up in a
something that you
circular
said.
thought. Is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, but I get it. I'm just
Yeah.
being facetious.
Yeah.
But SAT word. So, just to bring it back to something you said. You said if someone is using their free speech to kind of spread the
Infringe.
idea of infringing this free speech of others,
Yeah.
does that mean that consequences for that are passable or admissible? Like,
Well, sort of the idea is, do you then stop that speech? Like, do you
Right.
infringe on their right to free speech?
right. Okay.
You
I see
what I'm
how that
saying?
could be a slippery slope.
It's a circular thought, and then exactly a slippery slope. Yes.
Yeah, my alliterations are on point this
Bro,
episode.
I'm
I'm out of here.
You're fucking with my tongue right now.
Yo, Alex, how do you feel about punching Nazis?
You know when you see that video of Richard Spencer getting
Yeah.
punched by the guy with the mask on?
It felt damn good.
I know what you feel. He's getting what he deserves. Every time you punch a Nazi, you've created a recruitment tool for future Nazis. I know you want to think that you're going to somehow beat all the Nazis into submission and they're just going to be gone from this earth and there's some future utopia. There's not. There's always going to be people that their ideas threaten your way of life. And the best you could ever do against bad ideas is fight them with good ideas. You look at Dr. King, you look at what he achieved. Could you imagine that same civil rights movement with shotguns? That shit would have been a bloodbath.
Yeah.
His restraint, his attachment to principles allowed like
him
a
to-
50-year jump in civil rights movement, because when those cameras were pointed at those poor teens getting their asses kicked by full-grown men, it shamed the violent people and created sympathy that became its own weapon and fought all the old ideas of the 19th century and allowed for new ideas to come in. It allowed for the civil rights movement. It allowed for everything that we enjoy today. It allowed for the first black president. So fight your instincts, guys. This is probably worth noting. I'm not talking about people with rifles from Germany. I'm talking about neo-Nazis in America that are doing some stupid parade with tiki torches. If somebody threatens you violently, throw your hands up and fight them. I'm not saying not to, but if they're just like marching, who gives a shit, man? Make fun of them. Debate them. And you know what? If you actually look up any former Nazis that were reformed, what reformed them wasn't getting the shit kicked out of them. Look it up yourself if you don't believe me. It doesn't work. And if you really want to serve your cause, show some restraint.
So, all right. So there's a lot of bullet points. I'm glad that you feel strongly about this because it gives us something to kind of discourse about, right? You brought in Martin Luther King, right? And I think that his methods of nonviolence, I think that you can look at that through a different lens, because at the same time that Martin Luther King was doing what he was doing, there was also a bunch of people doing the violent approach. And not the violent approach, because it's not that they were promoting violence, but what they were saying was that violence is acceptable, right? And, by any means necessary, as a contrast. And then you have people like Stokely Carmichael, and he has a famous quote that's like, nonviolence only works if your enemy has a conscience. Right? Now, with that being said, these people were at the same time as Martin Luther King Jr. Now, the problem that I have consolidating the idea that Martin Luther King moved the civil rights movement 50 years or like changed that is the fact that he's the most promoted one. He's the one that we latch onto commercially. He's the biggest commercial success because it's very easy to be like, peace, love, and happiness. And you could promote that from both sides, right? So it's very difficult to promote somebody like Stokely Carmichael who's saying black power, right? He's screaming black power at the top of his lungs. They're raising up a fist in protest, and they're saying, yo, if you have to, defend yourself with tooth and nail.
If you have to.
No, not only if you have to. I'm sorry, I'll rephrase that. He was saying you have to defend yourself with tooth and nail because the institution that we're fighting has no conscience. They don't have a conscience that's going to say, because you're being nonviolent, we're going to respect that. And to his point, Martin Luther King got his fucking lid blew off, right? Like he got his head taken all the way off, right? Now, so that just shows you that the fight that you're fighting the people you're fighting against don't have the conscience to say, we see you being peaceful, we see you showing love, we see you organizing people of all races. Because Martin Luther King's vision was that people of all races should unite for economic freedom. That was his core value was empowering people to have economic freedom. Poor people, whether you were black, white, Asian, Spanish, whatever you were, it didn't matter. And that was like his big proponent. You know what I mean? Like, his dream was not about black people. His dream was about unifying humanity, right? And kind of lifting up people from poverty.
And nonviolent revolutions tend to be that way.
Right.
They tend to have the wide lens of pluralism and not just like, I just want my tribe to win.
Right.
I want both of our tribes.
So then that to me is what makes the statistics very, very questionable. Because to me, statistically, you would say that the nonviolent revolution worked because no one got hurt. So it's like when you measure the success of a nonviolent revolution, how do you measure that? Because would you consider Martin Luther King's civil rights movement successful if 60 years later we're still dealing with the same stigmas? We're still dealing with the same kind of things going on? Like Jim Crow changed to the prison industrial complex, and we're still dealing with those things. So do you consider the civil rights movement successful?
100% successful. I don't think we're done.
Okay.
And I mean, dude, there are Jewish people in America that still face threats from these Nazis. So, to make it seem like it's just a black versus white thing is missing a little bit of what's actually going on. There's a lot of, you could be a Caucasian Muslim and be threatened by these people. It's not really just white and black. But like when you attack these people and the cameras are rolling, like I said, you're creating a recruitment tool, and people who are more on the fence and who are maybe kind of like turned off by these white power, white supremacist people, now they look at them like, oh, well, they were just marching and they got hit in the face and the media is saying what a good job. Like, that's not freedom of speech. How about we just don't punch people in the face unless they threaten us personally? And, again, if you're actually going to try to push back on it, like, what's your end game here? Is your end game to just like create violence? Violence just begets more violence.
Yeah.
If your end game is to create a better world, let them fade away. Fight their bad ideas with good ideas.
But to Edgar's point, though, what if what they want is not a debate, though, right?
Yeah.
Do you think Nazis in this country have more power? I would say that they're a fringe group at best.
Okay. Here's the thing.
They are a fringe
we
group.
have
I'll
to kind of we have to sit back and say that we're using neo-Nazi as a euphemism here, right? Like we're not
maybe let's say white supremacists.
Yeah, we're not even actually talking about the neo-Nazi organization and the people that identify there. It's being used as a euphemism for anyone who has a contrary belief or anybody who has a belief that threatens your way of life. You know what I mean? Whatever group you're referring to.
Yeah.
I don't think ideas are worth starting violence over. I think actions could be. Like I said, if I'm in a situation where some Nazis are threatening me, I'm going to stand up for myself.
Well, that's.
But do you remember this meme of all right, so there was this white chick with blonde hair. There's a picture of her with blood all over her face. It's been debunked. It actually turns out that it was a background character from Walking Dead. But this was used as a recruitment tool for anti-Antifa violence. So white supremacist groups were using this picture, and people were buying it because when you look and you see pictures of people punching Richard Spencer in the face, while I understand the impulse, I think restraint is probably what would serve your goals better.
All right, so here's my whole thing. You just brought up so there's two things that I got to bring up. Number one, you said ideas are not something that should trigger violence.
Not in themselves. At least not in the United States, in a democracy where the police got your back. Well, if you're in a situation where you live in some small town and the police are actually coming out to get you, that's a whole different situation.
I feel like if you're at the heart of it, ideas are the only things worth being violent about.
Do you mean go up to people that are holding signs protesting and punch them in the face?
Yeah, I mean violence. Yeah. I mean violence. Like, for example, if we're here in America and we're fighting for the idea of America, you are part of the 13 colonies and you want your freedom from Britain and you're fighting for the idea of no taxation without representation, right? That's what you're fighting for. You have to get violent in order for that needle to move. It's like there are situations in which in order for the needle to move on your idea, you have to get violent.
Look at where you come from, the Dominican Republic. Compare that to the Haitian Revolution. Mm-hmm. Which would you consider a more successful revolution?
So, and that's the thing. We're talking about two failed revolutions. Were you going to jump in on something?
I was, yeah.
Go ahead. Go for that first, and then we'll cover the thing right afterwards, because I have that stored.
Yeah. All right, good. So I actually wanted to go back to what Alex was saying about the whole fringe group thing. And then also kind of to your point about the whole 13 colonies thing, the British Empire or whatnot, right? Fighting for your ideals, really, is what we're talking about. Certainly makes sense. Those are like two different situations, right? The British had dominion over the 13 colonies, and the people living here clearly didn't like that. These, like, neo-Nazis, I'm using air quotes here with my fingers, they are a fringe group, right? They don't have dominion over everyone else in this country. They're literally just exercising their right to the free speech, and they're just like, they're just expressing their opinions, right? Mm-hmm. They don't have, dominion over the rest of the country. It's not something we need to move collectively against, and so, I don't think it's something we need to.
It's also worth noting that in past decades they did pretty much resort to violence in every situation. Mm. And again, in any situation where someone is threatening you, you have a divine right to protect yourself.
Absolutely.
I believe that.
Yeah.
Now they have switched to a more nuanced, clean-cut, less tattoo-faced approach.
Yeah.
And you are feeding into their game if you punch them in the face. Because these dudes are wearing khakis and polo shirts tucked in, and their whole point is they're trying to trigger you into punching them in the face. Because that serves their recruitment.
Well,
and that's actually one thing I forgot to mention.
But they did used to be much more violent.
Yeah,
and they figured out a way to kind of go in through the back door.
Well,
and y'all are letting them in every time you punch them in the face.
Right, and so like these people are actually just utilizing like social media. It's like it's given them the platform to let others listen in on what they're talking about. These people have always existed. They've always been talking, but not everyone's been listening. The only difference now is that like we have the means to listen in on everyone's conversations.
True.
Well, I think it's more than that. Honestly, I think that there's a couple things that are more than that. But before I tell you why I think it's a little more than that, first of all, dominion.
Yes.
Establishing dominion, right? So I think I agree with you. Neo-Nazi groups do not have dominion over any of us. Definitely because it's a small fringe group that exists in this bubble that really, literally every day to day, I never have to deal with a neo-Nazi ever, at least not publicly, right? However, I think that they are a representation of a system that does have dominion over people, right? But before we continue do you guys subscribe to the idea of institutionalized racism?
In certain institutions, yeah, absolutely.
Well, in American institution, like in America, like do you believe that America is designed in a way to have institutionalized racism?
I think so, but it's definitely not in the way that's portrayed in the media. It definitely isn't like just police in general.
Oh no! It's not police. It's a historic system of
absolutely right. But unfortunately, that's how it's framed, and like that just like works backwards against what you want to move against.
So wait a second. So when you have that institutionalized racism, right, and then you have someone like Spencer, right? Mm-hmm.
Who, by the way, is a piece of shit.
He's not a voice on the record.
Yeah. On the record,
Alex would have punched him
like
too.
Richard Spencer.
So my whole shit is that when he's up there standing on that pedestal, he is not just a representative for neo-Nazis. He is a beacon for, like, he is the physical manifestation of that institutionalized racism that America has since the inception of its propaganda.
He's a charismatic recruiter for that institution. Yes.
Right. So then when you have that, when you attack him, You are not attacking neo-Nazis. You're not attacking him. I think that if you are the person doing the punching, I think mentally in your head, you are attacking the Dominion. You understand what I mean? Like, you are attacking the human form of those invisible contraptions that we feel.
I think that's accurate. Yeah.
So that's what I mean about Dominion. Like when
Right. I mean, that's with respect to you, though, right?
Right. With respect to the person doing the punching.
But when others see that, is that what they see, right? And I think that's what Alex's point is.
Right.
Yeah, you're giving them a look, man. If the cameras aren't rolling, how about this? Have at it.
Yeah,
if the cameras are rolling, don't.
Don't. Yeah.
Frankly, I think the real solution to this problem is like, if media
don't really have at it, guys.
Yeah,
Don't be violent.
No. Yeah, it's always better to just play nice. But like, really, if you really want like this whole movement, to stop, fucking Fox News, CNN, CBS, NBC, stop playing videos of this guy. Like, if you really want to solve this problem, stop playing videos.
Could
of
not
him.
agree with you more, man.
Well,
let them die.
Yeah.
In the minds of people.
Yes.
Yeah, like,
but
listen,
but they don't want to do that because obviously that gets more
They want
ratings.
those clicks. They want those views.
Like the real problems. There's some real problems. Like, for example, you mentioned that when you do that, it's a recruiting tool, right?
Yeah.
With it being a recruiting tool, they clearly don't need that because they use the picture of the Walking Dead extra.
Yeah.
Just as powerful
but
as a recruiting
CNN
tool.
isn't going to play that.
But the thing
But
is
CNN is going to play you punching Richard Spencer
Yeah.
because that
Right.
actually happened.
and I get
Yeah.
that, but the people that are being recruited by these groups are not watching CNN.
Well, so I would say recruitment. So there's a few layers to this. So recruitment doesn't just mean like people are going to march with them. It could just mean people that are going to vote sympathetically for candidates that that claim there's some kind of like anti-white culture movement in America.
Yeah.
And every chance you give them to show how these proclaimed ideals of freedom of speech only apply if it's the ideas that I support. I mean, which is an exaggeration. But as soon as you give them that statement, and that statement is technically true, where it can be reported in mainstream media, then there's no underground to it. It's become a mainstream video. You're not going to have CNN showing this stupid fake meme of this girl who supposedly got her face caved in, but they are going to show every other video of any Antifa person. So Richard Spencer very well could have been punched by one of his own people, but because it's been established that these people put on hoodies and wear the mask, anyone with a hoodie and a mask can pass for Antifa. For all I know, that was one of his own people punching him, and that was like a planned thing.
Right.
If you look at the punch, it looks like something from WWF. It doesn't even look like a real punch.
And it was perfectly timed.
So if your revolution has masks and hoodies and sunglasses, guess what? Now anyone could pretend to be part of your revolution by putting on a mask, a hoodie, and sunglasses.
Well, see, so for me, the idea, and the reason why I said the question was more philosophical is because I'm not actually thinking about Antifa versus neo-Nazis when I'm considering the idea.
If we're paying lesser of two evils, I definitely would more support Antifa's ideals than neo-Nazis.
Yeah.
I just don't really support violence in public.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of law and order.
Yeah, I just feel like, you know what, like you need a healthy dosage of violence and nonviolent representation in either scenario. Like going back to MLK, I don't think that MLK's vision stands without the support, without the things that were going on around him, right? Like, for example, his message of love wouldn't resonate as hard with if you didn't have the Black Panther Party right behind them saying we're gonna gear up for war, right?
They were playing defense.
Yeah, I think there's a
Defense
delicate
is
balance.
Totally cool.
I think there's a delicate balance though between the two. Like
Yin and yang.
Yeah, you need that. Like you need to have
It's a duality.
for anything. You need to
That's
have
true.
a non-violent aspect, but you also need the violent aspect because people like I said, back to Carmichael's fucking quote, it's just non-violence works when your enemy does not have a conscience. And even when you're fighting an institution, some of your enemies will have a conscience, some of them will not. And you need to be able to assess that and just deal with it accordingly. Like you can't draw a line in the sand and say non-violence, you know what I mean? And you can't draw a line in the sand and say, I'm shooting everybody, you know what I mean? So it's like, it really is just, I wouldn't say case by case, I would say you need both. You need an aspect of both.
I could get behind that.
Yeah.
And to your point, I'd even say without Malcolm X, Black Panthers, without these more militant groups, Martin Luther King maybe wouldn't have seemed as peaceful.
Right.
So they allowed a contrast where the American public could be like, oh, I could get behind this guy. Mm-hmm. You know, like a president like LBJ can be like, oh, I want to talk to that guy because he's the one that clearly is the one to deal with.
Right.
Yeah.
It was almost like a pick your poison kind of scenario.
Yeah, so
right?
I could see that. And again, it depends on the conditions because what was going on with American blacks in the 60s compared to now, I mean, that was some horrible violence going on towards them.
Yeah.
That's a situation where it calls for a more direct approach where, I mean, what we got now, you do see these incidents for sure. And, you know, what happened in Charlottesville, it was Charlottesville, right? Where the
the guy ran
I mean,
over
that
there.
stuff is terrible. And I'm obviously against that too. It's just, you know, if you want to serve the purpose of civil rights, listen to what Dr. King said, man. Practice, you turn the other cheek every once in a while, even if you're just doing it pragmatically for the cameras. Because there's a war of hearts and minds. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you want to stomp out their message by showing that you're actually better than them.
Yeah. With that said, we hate the 24-hour news cycle because that's the real perpetrator of these issues.
For sure.
It all comes down to that.
The real perpetrator of this issue is the 24-hour news cycles. We should have never instated that. We should have just went ahead and just kept the nightly news and the 2 prints a day. We would have been so much better for it.
So look at the thing
better.
that happened with this guy who, you know, I don't even remember his name. We were kind of laughing about this. That lawyer who was like, I'm going to call ICE.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, like, part of me is like, this is hilarious because the response to it has been so epic. Like, the clap back to this dude has been so epic that it's really
like
funny.
On Google, his law office.
Oh, my God.
Got changed to a Spanish restaurant. That was
Like,
fucking amazing.
I love it. Like, that's great.
Aaron fucked up.
AA Ron.
What a better way to deal with this guy than punching him in the face.
Yeah.
Right.
You turn him into a joke. I mean, I'm not saying that like everything that gets done under this purpose is just all okay, but
That's
like
honestly the best
that's a much better way to deal with the situation.
God.
Imagine if someone had just shot him. That'd be fucking terrible.
Dude, I got way more satisfaction out of that than like watching someone punch him.
Well,
in the
see,
face.
Google
but
reviews.
that's because of his.
Oh man,
But that's
Fucking
because of
amazing.
his offense. His offense warrants
Certainly.
teasing because his offense was teasing.
Had he like
So
beaten
his
someone
offense
up,
warrants
though.
teasing. Yeah.
Sure. Oh yeah.
Had he beaten someone up, or had he actually called ISIS on these people, or ISIS, you hear me? Had he? I can't believe y'all just let me rock with that too. Had he actually called ICE on these people, or actually gotten someone arrested, or actually did something that detrimental to them, right?
Yeah.
I think that a punch in the face might be warranted. Like if these ladies are working at this shop and then he calls ICE and gets them deported because he didn't like that they were speaking Spanish, I think that if he got punched in the face, I'd be cool with that.
Well, just to jump back to Richard Spencer though, did he? I mean, not to my knowledge, I don't think he ever like beat someone up, right?
Well, like I said, he's
Was
not,
that punch
no,
warranted?
well, like I said,
But he also knows what he's doing.
yeah,
Yeah,
he's,
I mean-
and like I said, he's a beacon for the ideal of the institutionalized racism that has existed in this country. He is speaking right towards the we should have never let you guys in the building.
The baser
right?
instincts.
So like
Absolutely.
so where your mind
Absolutely.
goes to immediately
Yeah.
is the violence and the chaos that you mentioned in the 60s. So your mind was going immediately there. So if you're standing on this pedestal saying this is where we need to be, you know what I mean? We need to be back to where we were. You are in a way threatening with direct violence.
Yeah.
You understand what I mean? So
Yeah.
so it's like that to me. It's a delicate balance. But now that we're done with the topic and I can stop being a devil's advocate, I do believe that you should never confirm anyone's bias, right? Like you punching someone because of what they're saying, all you're doing is reinforcing their bias.
Yeah.
Richard Spencer is not any less racist for it. He doesn't feel any less wrong for it.
You're giving Fox News all the clips they can play
Yeah,
over
you're
and over
giving
and
them
over
all-
again.
you're
He's
giving them
gonna
all that
stand
energy.
right back up and just like preach the same shit after that.
Yeah,
punch,
yeah, of course. You're not
Maybe
gonna-
even more so, like with
Yeah.
more conviction.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, just to comeback season, before we go to the PopCon, you mentioned about DR and Haiti. Which revolution I would consider more successful? So the difficult thing is that on the surface, I would say that the Dominican Revolution is head and shoulders more successful, essentially.
Ooh, I like that, Head and Shoulders.
Yeah, on the surface, it's more successful, but the reality of it is that it's two failed revolutions, right? It's two countries that failed to get proper dominion of themselves, right? It's two countries that failed to get proper freedom, because in Haiti, what they incited was they were the first. So Haiti got their freedom in 1804 by murdering everyone that was occupying the island.
Man,
Slave
woman, child.
Yes,
Yeah.
slave. It was
Yeah.
a slave revolution because they just brought the wrong slaves there.
Yeah.
They fucked up, and they actually brought a bunch of soldiers and generals to Haiti, and that happened because the island itself was a huge port to trading slaves into North America. So
Okay.
a lot of slaves passed through there, and a lot of the slaves that weren't bought and sold and shipped ended up being generals and soldier slaves, and they weren't sold and shipped for scars, wounds,
Right.
temperament, etc. So, and I hate to say someone wasn't sold because of their temperament. That made me feel bad.
I mean, that's the logic of the time.
That's the
right?
logic of the time.
Yeah.
So it's like, because of their temperament, those guys that weren't sold stayed on that island. What happened over time is that those generals and soldiers had the means to kill all the people on the island.
Right.
Do you know what I
Power
mean?
in
The
numbers.
French occupancy.
Yeah.
Now, what happened with them was that they battled and they fought. They bought their freedom in blood, but then they got hit with economical warfare, where Thomas Jefferson, who I hate very much, sent out a letter.
Edgar is on record for
Yeah.
saying
I
that
fucking hate
hell
Thomas
is
Jefferson.
guarded by Thomas Jefferson.
Hell is definitely guarded by Thomas Jefferson. That is like my stance, and it's because this motherfucker saw that revolution, and he wrote to all the other powers in Europe, and he said, listen, we cannot let these savages be successful. We need to do everything in our power to stop these savages from actually growing into a nation. So what France did was they implied taxes for every soldier killed. So like Haiti was paying that off until like the 1980s. And from 1804, like it just took them a long time to pay that off, because they also stopped trading with them. And Haiti had its own mistakes. They made their own mistake, like in government, because again, it was ran by soldiers and generals. It wasn't really the brightest politicians of the time trying to come up with how to run this country in the new world. So with that being said, Dominican Republic took a different approach, and Haitians hate us for it. But we took the approach of diplomacy, where we said, we just want to govern ourselves. Just give us the means to govern ourselves. And they negotiated something that allowed them to govern themselves. And what it did was it led to a lot of puppet governments, probably up until, I want to say, maybe the late 1990s. It was just from like 1870 something or 60 something, when Dominican Republic got their independence. It was just a series of puppet governments, followed by a dictatorship, followed by an alleged democracy, which was also just a puppet government ran by a different dictator, a much more nicer dictator, at least on the surface. And then democracy finally hit probably like late 90s. With that being said, those are both unsuccessful endeavors. Like, in terms of becoming a free nation, it's both unsuccessful endeavors. And the moment when they were a truly independent nation, and it was under a dictatorship, but he actually managed economic stability, where the dollar and the Dominican peso were of the same value. That's when it became a problem for the CIA, and he gets assassinated. The Dominican peso collapses, and we're right back into belonging to the U.S. At least not on paper, but in
Economically
theory.
dependent.
Dependent on the U.S. We went right back into debt with them. The reason why the economy balanced out was because he managed to pay off all the debt incurred from purchasing our freedom in the 1860s. And this man was a dictator. He was a terrible person. But economically speaking, he had a plan, an idea, executed it, paid off all that debt. The economy balanced out. CIA was not happy with that, because then he started threatening to join the Soviet Union. They didn't like any of that. He gets killed. Now, with that being said, we're talking about which one is more successful, but they're both on the losing end.
That's fair. And to be fair, like, this isn't the situation going on right now in the United States.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all.
But you're right. I mean, you could compare the two, and neither could be considered that successful. Right. Ethically, morally speaking, you can even look at the French Revolution.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they got bloody, man. They got real bloody.
Reign of Terror.
Reign of Terror. You compare
The French
that
Revolution?
and I'm not saying that the U.S. We didn't have some dirty shit we pulled on Britain, but it's referred to as a genteel war for a reason. Like, they pulled some terrorism tactics and, all that. But for the most part, they wanted freedom. They didn't want death and blood and carnage.
Yeah.
And they were serving, ideals of the Enlightenment period.
You're talking about the American Revolution.
The American Revolution against, freedom from Britain. And I mean, even after that revolution, we became friends with Britain.
Right.
Like almost immediately. Yeah, it led to another war eventually, but for the most part, everyone wanted just peace and prosperity.
Which war was that?
1812.
The War of 1812.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which I know less about. All I know is Canada was heavily involved in that one.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Canada heavily involved sounds like an oxymoron.
They burnt the White House.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Canada burnt it?
They had to move the White House. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
That's crazy.
Yeah, there's
Wait,
some
was it
gems
the
in there.
Canadian? I thought it was
gonna
the
be a
British
great-
that did that.
Well, I think via.
Oh,
Canada.
yeah, right.
That's going to be a
They're
great topic.
technically
By
still
way of Canada, yeah.
they were technically still a colony or whatever.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Which reminds me, we have a popcorn that is completely unrelated to piss. You hear me?
Love it.
Oh, Jesus! Jesus Christ! It's a conspiracy.
So we had a couple different popcorns that we wanted to go over, and again, popcorns are popular conspiracy theories that we decided to take a look at, have a laugh, have a chuckle, give it some background, get a better understanding for what it is and why anyone might believe that. So the second popcorn that we wanted to tackle last week, we did the Illuminati. This episode, we wanted to talk about AIDS, HIV, and AIDS. Now,
Ever heard of it?
have you ever heard of HIV? It kind of struck us at a time when we were in our early teens, right? And it gave us, when America was in its early teens, 60s and 70s, and America was finding their lust for romance and sex. They were finding their sexual identity. America did that probably the 60s or 70s.
As teens often do.
Yeah, as teens often do. So while we were finding our sexual identity, we get hit with this thing. Boom. HIV, AIDS, deadly virus. Slow that down. And there's a lot of theories about how AIDS started. And before we even look at some other ones, like, what theories do you guys know about how AIDS started? What are your theories on AIDS, where they started?
Some man who was a flight attendant, who I believe worked out of California, is kind of called Patient Zero as the one who kind of was very promiscuous and supposedly got down with a lot of people and kind of really got the ball rolling on the whole HIV thing. I don't know if that's been debunked or not, but my understanding is that, it kind of started, like you said, from the sexual revolution, but, some people attribute it back to like one specific flight attendant, which is kind of crazy and a little hard for me to follow, but, I guess if you have sex with enough people, you can do all sorts of... Hey, Genghis Khan is said to have had sex with enough people to have his DNA still present today. So
I'm probably his descendant.
yeah, so if what one man could do with his, or what one person could do with their genitalia is it could be pretty powerful. So I don't know.
Especially before condoms and birth control.
Yeah, I'm a
Before
little
they were
skeptical of it,
popular.
but
Yeah, but wait, there was condoms and birth control back then?
Yeah.
they've had condoms for hundreds of years. They used to
Really?
use sheep intestines.
Thousands, actually.
They used to use sheep intestines for condoms.
Yeah.
Wow.
I actually think it was a sheep bladder.
Okay.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
crazy.
they used to use organs for that. shit.
Because like royals and high society people didn't want to. They wanted to get down with good-looking peasants, but they didn't want to deal with the
children and all
ramifications
that,
of
yeah.
the
Gonorrhea.
children's. Yeah, or gonorrhea. But even before they even understood disease, they didn't want to give them their seed. So.
Yeah.
So they fucked animals instead.
No, they wrapped
no.
their stuff in animals. Yeah, no, well, yeah, I guess you're right. Yeah, it was kind of an orgy situation.
I don't know. I feel like if you put your dick inside of a lamb,
Fair.
and then put that lamb inside of a woman,
Dead animal.
are you fucking the woman or the lamb?
That is a very interesting way to look at it. Plus, I bet these early ones were very crude.
Yeah.
Like, what, a knot at the end? Like, maybe
Yeah.
some stitches?
Wait.
Like, not a good way to do it. And, I mean, the Romans used contraception, but they didn't use animal intestines for it.
What'd they use?
Like gels and stuff. I don't know. It gets really... I mean, how could you possibly know
Birth
what
controls existed for a really long time, as far as I know.
That's dope. I would love to have a future episode topic where we
Contraception.
Contraception.
That
Yeah,
is a
the
good
history of
topic.
contraception. Like, I want to
It's a
know
long-
how
it's a
deep
long
that goes,
history.
how successful it's been. Like, are condoms really the best way?
It's also interesting that that's been around for so long, given that like most of human history and like as a, part of it too, like religion
Yeah.
has always been promoting having more children.
Right.
But
That must have been a taboo way of thinking.
Yeah, right?
Back to AIDS. These are popular theories. Do you know any popular theories?
I actually didn't even know that much background information like Alex does about the patient zero thing. I just heard that I think it started with like monkeys or some shit like that. Yeah. Like humans fucking apes.
Yeah, you know what?
I think that's probably the most popular.
Yeah, like when I was a kid.
Story.
That is by far the most popular.
I think that's the most popular origin story.
Like when I was a kid, that was the one that I knew. When I was a kid, it was like, yo,
just fucked a bunch of apes, and they're like AIDS. That's how it started.
That's what you get.
The crazy shit is to me first of all, like, how do you fuck a monkey, dog? They're so strong. Like, how do you wrangle a monkey and fuck it?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, that's crazy to me.
Plus, why?
Well, I mean, yo, dog, people put their dicks inside of a sheep liver and then fucked a woman with it, not to give them their seed. There's all types of whys in history, bro.
That's true.
But then there's some other ones. There's some other more like sinister AIDS controversies, because the thing about AIDS is that we spoke about it briefly, is that the HIV virus itself that leads to AIDS, it hasn't mutated, it doesn't evolve, right? It's pretty much kind of like a standard set of a standard, what's it called, the virus? Chemical makeup of thing,
DNA.
No, like it's like whatever. Its makeup has been pretty standard since its inception. It doesn't change.
You're probably talking about RNA.
Probably, maybe, but like because with typical germs or like the flu is consistently evolving, and that's why you need a flu shot every year.
Right. Yeah.
The HIV virus doesn't work that way. It's not a consistent evolution. It's just a standard makeup. So that leads the way for a lot of different conspiracies about it. Like, for example, population control is one that's a very popular one. It's the CIA introduced the CIA or the FBI, depending on who you ask, right? Because J. Edgar Hoover, sadly, we share the name, but J. Edgar Hoover is another guardian of hell, and he was a raging homosexual that was completely homophobic, and you know, he has a whole bunch of tragedies behind him. Like, he was a total asshole, but he's part of that theory where it's like they released the HIV virus as a means for population controls against homosexuals, and that's why you have it arise in with the rise of free sex in the 70s. You have AIDS tagged right along with it because he was very prudent. It was kind of like, we can't have all these people having sex. Like, I'm the only one that's allowed the butt play. So then that's one popular theory. The other one is yes, fucking the monkey. We covered that one. Yeah. And then the other two is, number one, there's one that's you know how like AIDS is very big in Africa for multiple different reasons. Number one reason is because they have a lot of tribal home cures for it that involve sleeping with virgins. That if you had the HIV and you slept with 10 virgins, it would cure it. And then we understand how that would not be the best idea for someone who is HIV positive.
Then you got 11 people with HIV.
And but the other one, and this one's, there's actually two more. Like, so the other one was polio. Polio was very big in Africa at the time, the 60s, 50s. So people were using experimental vaccines to get rid of polio. And the HIV virus kind of spawned as a side effect of these polio vaccines. And that's why it's so big in Africa, because it was spread there first. So like patient zero happened there, and it kind of spread out from there. And then the whole shit, the monkey shit. For some reason, as a kid, I always understood it as somebody fucked a monkey.
Yeah.
The actual like scientific theory is that chimpanzees get a virus called SIV or something like that, and chimpanzees get this virus, and it's very similar to the HIV virus. So the prevalent thought is that it's somehow cross species. Whether that was by fucking or whether it was a chimpanzee in a lab, and you know what I mean, like just at some point there was a cross contamination between chimpanzees and us because the viruses are very similar.
Yeah. Well, can I just hop on this one?
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Yeah,
on the monkey?
Well, just on the genetics level, like how viruses work. All right.
Yes, please.
All right. Little bit of science here.
That's dope. That's a perfect way to close this out. Hit us with some fucking science.
A little bit of science here.
Blind us with science.
The way viruses work, right? They're they're not actually like living things as far as, like the scientific community would qualify as life, right? They're just bundles of things that people call RNA, which is essentially half of a DNA.
Right.
So like, the whole helical structure of DNA, and they're like sort of two sides of it, right?
Yeah.
So RNA is just like one half of that. So one strand of it, or one side of the DNA. And the way that viruses work are that they're just basically like a little balloon and a needle. A balloon of RNA, and then a needle at the exit point where it injects its RNA into a living cell.
That's hardcore.
It is. It's actually crazy if you like think about it. So they like sort of latch onto the surface of cells through certain receptors and things like that. They'll detect where they're at, and they'll inject their RNA into a cell and then invade the nucleus of the cell, which houses all the DNA. The RNA then proceeds to rewrite a bunch of the cell's DNA and force it to use its resources, the cell's resources, to create more of the virus's RNA and proliferate.
That's sick.
It basically like hijacks a cell and turns it into a factory for reproducing more viruses. Yeah. That's how viruses work, right? And the important thing to note, though, is that like RNA is easily mutated because it's only one side. There's no other side to balance it out, right? So it very easily mutates. That's why the flu changes from year to year. But humans don't, because we have DNA, or any other animals don't really yet. Exactly. And so the reasoning for why like HIV and AIDS is designed and that it doesn't change actually doesn't speak to me very much, mostly because yes, it's true that RNA can mutate very easily, but just because it mutates doesn't mean it's going to work.
Okay.
If that
what do
makes
you
any
mean?
sense.
I don't understand.
So like the flu mutates a lot, right? And it still works somehow, but that's mainly because the part of it that works doesn't mutate often, right? And like it just changes enough that like your antibodies and stuff can't fight against it. HIV, on the other hand, might be so specific of like a virus that any sort of mutation on it would change its like whole function, and it would not be able to hijack a cell and then like create more of itself.
Right.
If that makes sense, like it might mutate in such a way that it wouldn't cause
Wouldn't be able
autoimmune
to.
deficiency syndrome, right? It would just mutate in such a way that like it just reproduces itself and then doesn't like burst your fucking cell and shit. Like
Got it.
It needs to be hyper specific changes that result in these sorts of things.
Before we leave, I just have to ask you guys this, and we could leave on this part of the conspiracy theory behind AIDS. Why don't nobody die from it no more? And I know people die from it. I know regular people die from it. But there was a point where like celebrities were dying from it, right? Like there was
Magic
like
Johnson changed everything. He's
My
fucking
my understanding is that HIV damages your immune system.
right.
Things that like the part that would kill you is not the virus itself, right? It's like you'll get like pneumonia or some shit, or you'll get something else that you'll be helpless to fight against.
Yeah, it's like a country without an army.
Oh,
that's
wow. Okay.
that's what AIDS is like.
Costa Rica.
HIV is like
It's basically like a country without an army. A country can exist without an army, so long as it doesn't get invaded, right?
right.
If you can get that, if you can make sure you don't get invaded, you'll be all right.
So what we're saying for our conspiracy theory is that a bunch of celebrities have HIV. We just don't know.
I feel like this is one topic that I have to kind of like play the skeptic on. Like I can appreciate the conspiracy behind it, but I still just it seems to me just like a virus.
Yeah, and this is my parting gift here, because we're gonna have a whole episode on contraception now. Just make sure you make a note of that, Alex, because we need to do that, because I feel like
that topic.
Along with the whole AIDS commercials, I remember condoms being much more important when I was a kid. Like now that I'm an adult,
TLC?
I feel like condoms get used way less.
Yeah.
Like way less. So it's like, why isn't there a huge increase in like just STDs? I don't understand. Like it's like condoms are being used way less now. Like from just my personal experience and like just my outlook. Like if I talk to all of my friends, like
ladies out there, stay away from Edgar.
Yeah, my friend just told me. He just told me, yo, did you know like adults don't use condoms. I'm like, wait, what? I'm like, yo. He's like, yo, adult girls, they don't like it. And I'm like, yo, all right. I guess that's the wave. I don't get it. And I'm just like, yo, it's true. I would never offend a woman with, yeah, I'm gonna put a condom on to have sex with you. I would never offend a woman that way. So stay away from Edgar. Yo, guys, boys and girls, thank you for listening. We are on our way out of here.
Ending with a brutal honesty.
Yeah.
And on that note.